Before we start this video, a quick shout out to the rating group Neverland for showing the full fight, and congratulations on the world first clear, link to their video in the description. It's no lie that I'm a big 14 fan, but I'm also huge into the lore and story of Final Fantasy XIV. I'm pretty convinced that the Hydaelyn and Zodiac arc is the best video game story ever created, and I love the care the writers and lore team take on making sure everything fits together. But recently, the developers got a chance to redo the Dragonsong War story featured in Heavensward, and in the recent Dragonsong Reprise, were able to give us a glimpse at what would have happened had things gone differently, and the impact it would have had on the entire story would be pretty crazy. So, I decided I wanted to make a video looking a bit deeper into the potential future that would have followed after the alternate events presented in Dragonsong Reprise. So for context, the original sequence of events is as follows. The Warrior of Light follows Archbishop Thordan and his knights to the vault, and there, Harchefont is killed protecting the Warrior of Light from a spear thrown by one of the knights. Thordan lets slip that they are heading to Ozzy's Law, a floating artificial island, and the Warrior of Light and their friends immediately set off to stop Thordan. En route to Ozzy's Law, another companion of the Warrior of Light, Ysayle, sacrifices herself to allow the Warrior of Light passage into Ozzy's Law safely. The death of these two characters allow the Warrior of Light to stop Thordan, who has transformed himself and his knights into Thordan and the Knights of the Round. The Dragoon Estinian is then taken over by Nidhogg and launches one final assault on Ishgard. The Warrior of Light finally destroys Nidhogg and saves Estinian. The events of what happened here would pave the way for the rest of the story, with Nidhogg's eyes being used to create the Primal Shinryu and lead the Warrior of Light to liberate El Amigo and Doma from Imperial rule, which then would lead into Shadowbringers and Endwalker. The events of Heavensward's story have long-lasting consequences to this very day in the story of Final Fantasy XIV. Dragonsong Reprise, however, offers an alternate telling of the Dragonsong War. Harchefont is saved by the Warrior of Light, and Thordan is able to escape to Ozzy's Law without us pursuing him. This also spares the life of Ysayle. However, without us there to stop Thordan, Thordan is able to absorb the power of the Sleeping Warring Triad in Ozzy's Law, and the next time we see Thordan and his knights is in Dravania, where he is seen tempering dragons. We kill the tempered dragons and the knights. Thordan, however, is spared by the Warrior of Light. Estinian is still changed into Nidhogg and the events of the Final Steps of Faith happen. However, without us having met with the dragon Hraesvelgr, Nidhogg uses Alekan technology to force his brute brother to fight against us in the Final Steps of Faith. We kill Nidhogg and Hraesvelgr, and before we could deal with the 4 pairs of dragon eyes just laying out in the open, Thordan arrives and absorbs the power of both Nidhogg and Hraesvelgr, becoming Dragon-King Thordan. And after one last battle with the Warrior of Light, Thordan is finally killed, and Nidhogg and Hraesvelgr are freed from his grasp and move on to the afterlife. Saving the life of one of her companions drastically changes the immediate events of the Dragonsong War. But if you dig it a little deeper, it's crazy how much this would potentially change the events after the war. So let's deep dive into what exactly could have happened. Let's pretend we live in the alternate universe where Dragon-King Thordan was the final boss of Heavensward in patch 3.3, and let's look into what would have happened in the story following those events. So I want to start off with the big implications of Dragon-King Thordan himself. We know for a fact that the first was being flooded as of patch 3.0 due to the events of Artbird and his friends. Thordan's umbral polarity would have led to the 8th calamity had we not stopped Thordan in Ozzy's Law, and he was free to wage war against the dragons. However, the sheer power of Dragon-King Thordan brings into question the fight against him didn't lead directly into an 8th umbral calamity. The amount of umbral ether he would have been using would almost certainly force the first to rejoin. We already saw this with the 7th umbral calamity, where Bahamut's destruction was using enough astral ether to force the 7th shard to rejoin to the source. Assuming that Dragon-King Thordan's attacks were enough to trigger the 8th calamity, and we managed to cut it short, the Warriors of Darkness wouldn't have been brought to the source. The only reason they were brought there was because killing Thordan stopped the 8th calamity and forces Elidibus to use Artbird and his friends to cause the calamity by killing us. This already drastically changed the events of Shadowbringers as we travel to the first to stop the 8th calamity from happening. In the original timeline, we throw Nidhogg's eyes into the Sea of Clouds below Ishgard, assuming nobody will be able to retrieve them. However, with the death of both Nidhogg and Hraesvelgr in Sorkai, we would presumably leave the 4 eyes in the churning mists with Hraesvelgr's brood, assuming that nobody would be stupid enough to try and steal them from the dragons themselves. I'd also argue that Harchefont and Ysayle would officially join the Scions, both joining the Warrior of Light on immediate adventures and acting as intermediates between Ishgard and the Scions. So, without the Warriors of Darkness to retrieve the eyes, but with the first being rejoined, Elidibus presumably leaves the eyes alone for now. Fast forward to the assault on Bilzar's Wall by Ilbert as the Griffin. Without Nidhogg's eyes, he would probably still try to summon a Primal. Shinryu, however, will would be nowhere near as strong as he was fueled by Nidhogg, so with the combined might of the Scions and the Warrior of Light, they would have been able to take down this new primal without many problems. However, the Empire would still see the assault on Baelsar's wall as an act of aggression, and the events of Stormblood would happen. The Warrior of Light would liberate Alamigo and Doma, albeit without Xenos using Shinru. However, Xenos would use Omega to fight the Warrior of Light. Without us finding Omega to stop Shinryu, the Empire would have unearthed Omega and used them against the Grand Companies. Omega's quest to improve himself would have put him at odds with Xenos, who, in his sheer strength, would manage to fight Omega successfully and put him down. Omega taking the opportunity to improve himself by allowing Xenos to control him. The Warrior of Light would defeat the Xenos-Omega hybrid, and the same events as Stormblood would play out. Alamigo and Doma are liberated, and the Garleans launch a full-scale offensive against Eorzea. Elidibus would still take up Xenos' body to try and kill us, as we continue to be the only thing capable of fully stopping the Ascians. So, with the Scions fully there for the fight against Garlemald, Elidibus stealing Xenos' body would lead the Scions to procure White Aura Sight, which would be used against Elidibus and killing him permanently at the Gimlet Dark. Without the first there to power up Black Rose, the Warrior of Light and the Scions would die to the gas. Black Rose at most would put people in a coma, putting their Aether into stasis. The Scions would eventually figure out a way to reverse the effects, which then in turn would lead to the discovery of how to reverse tempering. Xenos would recover his body, and would try to fight the Warrior of Light once more, but he is ignored as the Warrior of Light and the Scions focus on the Empire's assault against the Eorzean alliance. The death of Elidibus would push Emet-Selch to the brink. Now the last of the Unsundered Ancients, he'd kill Varys and take over his body to lead the Empire. Using the weapon program, the Scions and the Warrior of Light are forced to fight against the various weapons developed by Garlemald. The Scions and the Warrior of Light sneak their way into Garlemald, which would now still be a bustling city. Emet-Selch would fight against the Warrior of Light, but with the help of Xenos under the promise of one last fight, Emet-Selch is defeated and permanently destroyed. Xenos and the Warrior of Light in the smoldering remains of the arena would fight one last time, Xenos permanently dying and the Warrior of Light collapsing among the rubble. Without Elidibus around to keep him in check, Van Daniel would attempt to free Zodiark from the moon to use him to cause the final days. However, with the cure for tempering being found earlier, Van Daniel's plans of destroying the seals on the moon is interrupted due to the lack of ether being siphoned from the constantly summoned primals. He would, however, use the eyes in Sorkai and attempt to use them to blast the moon open. He is stopped and as a last-ditch effort tries to escape to the moon to destroy the seals himself. The Warrior of Light would follow Van Daniel and stop him. Van Daniel would use the eyes as a power source and becomes a primal based around his Amon reincarnation. The Warrior of Light would stop Van Daniel and save the moon from being destroyed. Without Zodiark's death removing the Aether layer from the planet, the final days could never happen. Hydaelyn would have died in the 8th Calamity, and in her stead, the Mother Crystal would float lifelessly in the Ethereal Sea. However, without the need to travel to the edge of creation, the source is saved and no longer under threat of the Ascians or the final days. And that is just one possible future that could follow Dragon-King Thordan. It's insane how one tiny change would affect the entire rest of the story of 14 like this. The pure implications of the new Ultimate story is something I don't think any of us would have expected, and I think we could have a lot of fun discussing how exactly the story would unfold had anything gone differently. Anyway, that's just my interpretation of the story. It's pure fanfiction, and maybe you have different ideas. Maybe the 8th Calamity didn't happen, maybe Xenos joined the Scions, maybe Emet-Selch was untempered. The door is open to so many what-ifs by just saving Honchefont and the direct consequences of that. I invite anybody to come up with their own post-DSU story. It is honestly insane how much one tiny change just cracks open the entire story. And obviously there is stuff I didn't think about. Maybe you can come up with something better. Thanks for watching this video, you guys. I really just wanted to make this video after it had dawned on me just how much Dragon-King Thordan implied. And once again, a huge congratulations to Neverland for clearing DSU. If you like this video, please subscribe and like. It helps the channel, and this will probably be the first of many 14 videos. You don't put 1400 hours into a game without being passionate about it, no? Anyway, again, thanks for watching. I love you.